LiSTNR production.
The Lindt Café siege is one of Australia's most infamous crimes. A terrorist took 10 customers and 8 employees hostage back in December 2014. The Sydney siege resulted in a 16-hour standoff, culminating in a gunshot being fired by the offender, Man Haron Monis, from within the cafe. Officers from the New South Wales Police Tactical Operations Unit, or the TOU, subsequently stormed the cafe. Tragically, hostage Tory Johnson was shot by Monis, while hostage Katrina Dawson was fatally injured by a ricochet from police fire during the operation. Monis was also killed in the incident. My guest this week led the police operation storming the cafe. His name is Ben Besant. I'm former police officer Brent Sanders, and for the past 25 years, I've dedicated myself to sharing what I've learnt on the force to the Australian public so they can better protect themselves from falling victim to crime. So with the help of some of the most respected current and former detectives and high-ranking law enforcement agents, we're going to pull back the curtain on what life is like on the force and what they've learned about how crime and criminals really work. These are real stories from real detectives. You've actually written a book about this, about your involvement, and the book is entitled Tiger, 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 which relates to the moment you went into the cafe. I'm just wondering if you can just give us some lead up to that and your involvement once you entered that environment.
Yeah, of course. So yeah, Tiger, Tiger, Tiger was the code word to initiate our entry, which was a good 16 hours after we turned up. Prior to that, it was a very heightened time with terrorism. We've been doing a lot of counter-terrorism work and arrests. So for us, we were already very heightened. We'd had almost daily briefings from counter-terrorism, all this sort of thing. And I'd actually just returned to the office, walk into the office, and I could tell something was wrong straight away. My sergeant said, just grab your stuff, we're going. I just made the comment, so the big one's happening. He's like, yep. From that, a lot of the other operators had already been deployed down there. I rushed down there with that sergeant and another bloke in the armoured vehicle, pulled up in Elizabeth Street. The scene was sort of chaos at that time. There's lots of people running around, screaming. General duties police officer trying to remove everyone from the scene. Initially, I was deployed down the bottom on the Alpha team on Elizabeth Street. We later got moved to Phillip Street and put into the truck loading bay where we remained the next 16 hours. As you can imagine, that 16 hours was a very, very long time. We didn't have much vision or updates or intelligence as to what was happening inside. We had 3 sniper teams up in different positions. The windows were very stenciled and small in comparison, couldn't provide much of what was happening in there, and he was always well hidden. At one point, Paulie, my shield man, and I, because when I took up position in the Alpha team, we have the shield man, and my role throughout the day and throughout the job was to be first cover man. So I had my M4. He'd make entry first. I had my weapon up, and my primary responsibility was to engage the terrorist. Yeah, anyway, so Paulie and I approached the sergeant, deeply concerned. We had no intelligence coming in. We got a guy, a terrorist in there with a shotgun and a backpack bomb. That was the intelligence we had, plus he'd planted numerous other bombs in the city. He gave us permission. We did push forward, and there's 4 windows across the front on Phillip Street of the cafe before the front glass entry doors, and we managed to look into the cafe for a good, I think it was up to 30 minutes or so, and observing all the hostages in there, in their heavily distressed state. They were openly crying, shaking, just completely distressed. I saw a couple of them holding up the black Islamic flags on the window. So yeah, that also told us how very real they thought it was. And I did manage to see him. He appeared quite a few times. I made observations of his shotgun. It was a sawn-off pump-action shotgun, and the backpack was always the main concern. And from every bit of training that I'd had, including with Army specialists only weeks or months before, it was a full black backpack, like a camelback, and I could clearly see wires protruding from the bottom. So, yeah, from all my training and everything I saw, the way he was carrying it, everything, I believed wholeheartedly that it was a bomb throughout the day at the time of entry, and even later when I came back out, I still always believed it was a bomb, which was always the greatest concern. It changed the whole dynamic of the job. One man in there with a shotgun, we're more than capable of dealing with it, and I'd like to think we would have gone in a lot earlier. But the fact there's a bomb just changes the whole dynamic of the job, because potential entry and he detonates the bomb, he will more than likely kill every single hostage in the cafe and any of us making entry. So I can defend the boss's decisions to an extent into perhaps why they didn't send us in earlier, because they would have been of belief too. We go in, he detonates, he's killing it, he's killed everyone. So defeats the whole purpose of the rescue mission. Some of the criticism later was why was a sniper shot not taken. Every time I saw him, and I believe any other observations throughout the day, he always had a hostage in front of him. And when I saw him, he'd always have at least a shotgun pointed in the middle of their back or even on the back of their head the whole time. So as a sniper, you know the only way to shoot him and kill him in a way that would stop him from the natural jerk reflex, which would be to pull the trigger, is at the top of the brainstem, the medulla oblongata, and that's an extremely difficult shot, especially in the circumstances. So I'd suggest that was that, and the fact that a common practice around that time was a dead man switch. So if you had killed him, releases the detonator and everyone blows up inside.
Just that term, dead man switch, if I could just get you to fill in the gaps there. This is often used by suicide bombers.
Yes.
Just explain that and the impact that has on any deployment of sending teams in.
Common practice, as we said, it had been used many times before in other terrorism jobs with explosives. So ultimately what happens is if you are to shoot or completely incapacitate him, he would have a switch in, say, his hand, and the moment that he's either killed or incapacitated, he releases his hand, which is the body's natural reflex, and that's enough to detonate the bomb. So either a sniper shot or even going in earlier in the day, you shoot him, bang, he releases that. It kills everyone inside. So yeah, as I said, I can defend the boss's decision making in relation to that to a point. I like to reiterate, to a point. So yeah, throughout the day there was lots of ups and downs. We were there for 16 hours in our full kit and the full sun. It was a long day, but we managed as we do, as we're trained for. Then finally, night comes around, and it was a very surreal feeling in the city, because I've spent time in the city, and there was nothing. It was just so quiet. I remember, like, you get the streets and there's like rubbish blowing down the street, and there's a pedestrian crossing. You could hear the beeper going off, that little annoying noise. But that was sort of it, and everything was quiet. There was no one to be seen, just us in the street. There was probably 200 metres down the road, there was a swarm of cameras filming everything, and I knew someone was in Channel 7 filming, but yeah, it was a very surreal feeling. Anyway, lots of ups and downs during the day. We've been told to prepare for an EA, which would mean an emergency action where we have to go in. We've been pushing the entire day for a deliberate action, which is ultimately, I still can't talk about our exact options we wanted to use, but essentially it means going in at our time of choosing, using our capabilities to make the entry, and doesn't take much to sort of work it out from watching other SWAT shows or military shows. Not saying it was a consideration, but we have a lot of capabilities, say explosive entry or diversions or anything. So I'm not committing to saying anything, but we have the capabilities to do so. ultimately it's your Tom and choosing. He doesn't get to dictate the thing, but it was never approved. So still to this day, very frustrating because I think things would have ended differently. But night finally comes around and it had a bit of a different feel within our group. We'd actually talked about it. We were there for 16 hours, so we did talk about a lot of things. And one thing that really still, I remember the exact conversation where we'd sort of start out, I think Paulie was joking around saying, "Oh, we all go in there, boys. It's going to be all beer and metal for the families and not us." And then we started quite a real conversation, which doesn't happen much with a bunch of blokes like us. But yeah, we in that moment we all faced the reality that we believed wholeheartedly we do our job, which we're all willing to do. The moment we go in there, we're all going to die. So that was a big moment for me and everyone. And after that, everyone just went quiet in our stack and stood there, and I could tell we were all sort of processing that. And I actually texted my wife at the time, just asked her to send me a few more photos of my little girl. She was heavily pregnant, so yeah, I got a couple of photos. Just wanted to see a couple more photos, and I thought, yeah, I'm never going to meet my next child to be born. And talking to Paulie and showing him photos of my little girl, and he showed me some photos of his boys, and he even said to me, looked at me and said, "Oh, I love you, bro," and so yeah, I love you too, mate. And in a way, we were sort of essentially saying goodbye to each other. And when texting my wife at the time, I sort of in a roundabout way said my goodbye. So I was preparing for that because I 100% believed it, as did every other TAU operator. We go in where it's nearly beyond probable. We all believe we're going to die. So that's why a big part of why I wrote the book. I wanted to tell the brave story of every TAU operator who went in that day. Back to the story. It's night time now. Hostages have been coming out throughout the day. I believe, I can't say, but I imagine the police command were happy that there were hostages still escaping. But in our minds, that was concerning because they'd refused all his requests. Hostages were escaping, and it would have just been enraging him. 2 a.m. comes around, and we get a police hierarchy consulted a high-profile psychiatrist, and I believe it's his advice, and the message came over that they believed it was settling down for the night. Our response was a lot of obscenities. Couldn't believe what we were hearing. Anyway, that's for radio, so I won't say what was said, but yeah, we were infuriated by that. That's what they thought. And yeah, it was only minutes later, standing in the stack behind Paulie, and bang, hear a huge blast go off within the cafe. Confusion by us. It definitely sounded like a shotgun, but we couldn't hear. He'd turned the lights off earlier. We couldn't see into it from where we were. The next thing we hear over the radio, the number of hostages ran out. That was when the 6 or so hostages ran out, and he'd actually fired on them. So once we'd heard that, it was, all of us believed he's fired on hostages now. He's tried to kill hostages. He's now enraged. That meets all the thresholds for an emergency action as far as we understood it. So yeah, completely just ready, in line, just focusing on the front door and everything that I now had to do. And I remember even looking down at Paulie, and he's literally rocking on his feet, just desperate to go. And then we didn't. Minutes and minutes went by and nothing happened, which is very, very difficult, as you can imagine, because he's just fired on hostages. You're deeply concerned for what he's about to do to the other hostages. And another thing that Paulie and I and the sergeant, our team, looking in on the hostages early in the day, I felt as if I had an emotional attachment to them now. I knew they weren't just hostages, but I'd seen the people, and I'm always someone who wants to help, desperately wants to help and protect people who need protecting. It's sort of who I am, and I believe a trait of the TAU. And just standing there for the minutes and minutes that went by, felt like an eternity. We couldn't understand even saying things within the team, and the sergeants just hold. Then a second round went off inside the cafe, and we were 100% certain. It's like, definitely rounds going up. What is he doing? And knowing now what I didn't at the time, he'd actually put Tory Johnson, the hostage, on his knees and fired above his head. And still we weren't allowed to go in. I talk about it in my book that it took every ounce of my strength not to just, and I know others were feeling it, just to go in. We knew this was going to end so badly, but we're trained to do what we're told, and we'd like to think there was something that we didn't know. So we were never going to break a direct order, but it was extremely difficult, I'd say. And then a little while after, a third round went off within the cafe, and I still remember the exact call coming over from a sniper. It was hostage down, white window 2, hostage down, white window 2, which was when he executed Tory Johnson, which is still definitely difficult for me to talk about and think about, because for me, I believe that if we'd been allowed to do our job at when we should have, that I'd like to think that I could have saved his life. And from everything I know now, he's an extremely brave man, staying there to be with all the hostages and make sure they were right. He could have left so many times, and he didn't. So that's still difficult for me to talk about. But in that moment, I was thinking exactly what I just said then, but also completely focused now. I was even rehearsing what I've got to do, which is something I used to do from motocross racing. Like, you're on the starting line, you're waiting to go, you rehearse everything you're about to do, and which eventuates hopefully into actually doing what you're rehearsing. And finally the call came over, Tiger, 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 which is the title of my book, which meant we could execute the EA. So Paulie took off very quickly, surprisingly quickly, carrying the big shield, and I was running on his shoulder. The plan for the EA was for us to get to the front door and get in as fast as we could, but the last two operators on the stack had a shotgun with specialised rounds to try and shoot out the first of 4 windows and deploy Santa flash grenades into it as a distraction, our only form of distraction really under an EA, with the permissions we had, which was ineffective because it actually used to be an old bank, so it had the bullet-resistant glass, which, going back to the sniper shot, would have made it even more difficult. Not impossible, but a lot more difficult. So we're running as fast as we can to the front door, shotgun rounds going off behind us, cracking the night air. Paulie's pulled up on the left of the 2 large glass door panels, and then I position myself on his left with the muzzle of my rifle past the shield and light source and laser on, and I was panning the room looking for him. And that's when the white of his shirt reflected off, because it was all dark, and that's when I saw him. He was in the far back corner, sort of directly across from us. And as I discuss in the book, and we touched on before, in moments like that, everything just slows down so much it's impossible to explain and really sort of describe to people how much it actually does in that moment. From the moment, I saw him, I had my laser pointed right in the centre of his chest, which is centre body mass, as we're trained to do, especially with other hostages around. And that's when, he seen me initially. He was looking at the back window where the other guys tried breaching it, and he swiveled his shotgun around, and we literally locked eyes in that moment. And I remember thinking, when I was looking at him, I'm thinking, I'm going to kill you. That were the exact thoughts going through my head, because I knew the only chance that that any of the hostages have, the remaining hostages, and to an extent any of us, was to try and kill him as fast as I could to stop him from detonating the bomb. And then, as I said, it had slowed down so much, felt like a long time before the breacher with his specialised rounds with a shotgun to breach the window. It felt like so long, may have been a second. But anyway, as you can imagine, looking with a light source, there's a lot of reflection back off the window. Then he breached it with the shotgun and as I said in my book, it just fell down in slow-mo, completely slow-mo, the glass coming to the ground. And then it became more clear with my light source. And as all this happening, Paulie's taking his step in, and on my first step, I fired my first shot, bang, fired, and stepping forward, fired a second shot. And as you can imagine, my whole vision just completely fixated on him. He's the only threat within there. And that's when he's fired on us the first time. So it's a huge muzzle flash and explosion within it. And I still at this point felt a little bit of protection because I'm behind Paulie. So as soon as my vision cleared, I just kept walking forward, kept firing on the move, which we've trained extensively for, and to move to the threat. So I kept walking forward, kept firing, waited for my muzzle to stabilise, saw the laser in his chest, and just kept firing, moving forward on him. I felt something hit my foot as I was walking forward, so I stopped at that point. I do recall, obviously, nearly my entire focus is on him, but I remember someone screaming from behind, man down, man down. I didn't know who it was, and obviously concerning in the moment, but at the same time I knew I had to block it out. So I just kept firing, and then a second muzzle flash from his end. He's fired on me again, and in that moment I became very aware that I was now on my own. The first round actually had fired at Paulie, had clipped the top of his shield and hit the other glass entrance door, and all of that weight from all the glass coming down on top of him and pulling the shield down. It was only momentarily, but it was enough to slow him down, and I kept pushing forward on my own. So in that moment, I became very aware that I was now completely exposed, and he may have been only 7 metres or so in front of me. And you'd know from police force, you're doing well to miss someone at that range. So I still remember being behind my rifle and just squinting my eyes because I completely believed I was about to be impacted, potentially my face blown off, but didn't happen and regathered so very quickly. And my laser still on his centre body mass, and as I said, everything slows down so much, even your thoughts. But I did think, why is he not going down? I know I'm hitting him. I'm hitting him 100%. I'm hitting him with the laser on his chest. And so I did. I moved, as I was firing, I moved my laser up through his neck and onto his head and fired on his head a number of times. And that's when he started to buckle and come forward somewhat. Still couldn't be sure he's not taking a knee or anything. So, I fired a couple of times on the way down. And then eventually he's come to rest. And even when he was lying down, and I believed that he was more than likely dead, I still had my laser pointer on him with my finger on the trigger, just ready to engage. And even slight movement, anything that could have resembled him going for a switch or anything to detonate, I would have fired on him again. And still completely fixated on him. And that's when one of the stun grenades from one of the other boys deploying it, I believe, must have bounced off the ground and it's detonated right in my ear. So massive explosion and sort of snapped me out of it really quickly. My shield man, Paulie, come forward and he's screaming out with you, tactical term. So I went with him and we pushed forward onto him. He's still a threat. I had my finger on the trigger ready to engage and pushed forward to him as quickly as we could and stood over him. And it was very obvious that he was no longer a threat, lying there in a pool of blood. But I still remember looking down at the backpack, and it was completely full, and there was wires, and even in that moment, standing right over the top of it, I still believed there was a bomb, and I knew that was still a threat. And that's when I heard Paulie screaming out, "You have been saved," and that was one of the hostages, which was Louisa Hope, and that was now my new priority, was to get as many out as I could before the bomb potentially went off.
It's 10 years ago. It's 10 years ago.
Mm.
But we're sitting here chatting about it, mate. It must feel for you in many ways like it was yesterday.
Yeah, in a lot of ways it does. In other ways, or other parts of the day, not so much. But what we just discussed, or with the hostages, and later when I found Katrina, and yes, some things feel like it was only yesterday. So,
Tragically, in the crossfire, there was one of the hostages did lose her life as well, and this must have weighed extremely heavily on you, together with everything else. Yeah,
from everything I'd done in my career, including killing him, standing over him, processing all of that, it's. I know I'd still be in the TAU today, I believe, yeah, for certain. But finding Katrina, and then the way she died, and then finding out it was from police shrapnel that had killed her, and then blaming myself for it, is the one thing that I could never process or lock away. But to tell the story from then, I'd also like to say quickly that from the moment that window, the front glass door was breached, and I pushed forward and fired as many shots as I did, which has been scrutinised, 15 to 17 shots. That was it. All the testing, everything's come out as between 3 to 4 seconds total. So that's how quickly it happened, and I knew that I just had to kill him to get him down. So I knew, and anyone in the military will tell you, if you need someone dead, you keep firing till they stop. Anyway, so Paulie found the hostage, which was actually Louisa Hope, and we started to drag her out. She had her foot was also hit by shrapnel, and it was really bad. Her foot was actually being dragged behind, so that was pretty horrific. Dragged her out. Then I came back into the cafe. Lights were now on. It was a horrendous scene. Just screaming hostages, bullet casings, stun grenades, blood everywhere. But as I said before, my main priority now was to get as many hostages out as I can, and the bomb, as we all believed, was still a very real threat. So yeah, scanning the room, and in the back corner, sort of directly behind where he was, there's a number of tables stacked up, and as I was looking under there, I observed what I knew was someone's head. I thought it was a hostage. I screamed out someone else. We cleared all the tables out, and as we were throwing the tables away, looking down, I could more and more of her appeared. She was a blonde lady with her hair pulled back in a ponytail and wearing like a business style suit, and knew she wasn't in a good way. There was evidence of that. Anyway, I took a knee as quickly as I could, and I rolled her over onto her back to assess her. And as I did, she's head's sort of lying on my forearm, and right from the first moment I looked at her, I realised that she was in a bad way. She was gasping desperately for air, and the more I looked, the more I realised each gasp for air was getting less and less. I also the feeling of being I was powerless. I knew I was powerless in that moment to actually help her. There were other operators with me at this stage. My best mate Gus was there, and Paulie, and screaming for the paramedics, which I knew would be there. And yeah, we literally looking into each other's eyes, and all I could do was just to attempt to comfort her in the moment and just will her to take another breath, which is, I didn't say it aloud, but within myself, I was just pretty much praying that she'd take another breath. And as I was watching and looking into her eyes, each breath was getting less and less. And then she took her last breath. Which is still probably the hardest moment of my life, and I still think about it a lot, if not daily. And yeah, it was very difficult. The paramedics eventually arrived and started their CPR and everything, and but I knew within myself that ultimately she'd taken her last breath, and very, very hard. And then after, I believe it was only a day or two later, and I was actually, after all of this and everything, it was a really long day. It actually went, even when we were out and our job was done, we were there for another 6, 8, 10 hours or something, and finally went home. That was extremely difficult to switch off after all of that, after all the trauma, everything that happened. I actually went to my daughter's preschool Christmas pageant the night I went home for a couple of nights. I don't think I slept, but got up and went to that, and just the contrast is just immense. Like, there's just everything that I just described, and then being there with everyone just innocent and happy and loving Christmas. All the girls, all the kids were all dressed up so cute, and it was just so nice. And my daughter was actually scared to have a dance at the front. Quite the contrast in itself too. So I just comforted her and tried dancing with her, but I couldn't. The flashbacks just constantly hammering me. I couldn't, and I knew over the weeks and months that sort of went by, I knew that this one had definitely impacted on me. It was one that I knew had changed me forever, and like my hypervigilance, my symptoms was just skyrocketing and wouldn't go down. I remember a psychologist told me from an incident like that may take to get your adrenaline levels back to a normal level may take between 6 to 12 months. So yeah, that was immense. But yeah, my symptoms, I knew I was unravelling, but I just desperate to stay with my mates and my support network, and symptoms were as bad as the whole time I was at work, just my hand on my gun. Everywhere, my hypervigilance was out of control. I'd walk around the police centre seeing other people or anywhere and just see them being shot and bleeding out in front of me. Anywhere I saw a blonde woman, instantly believe it's Katrina Dawson and have like a panic attack that I had to try and conceal. And yeah, it was a very difficult time for me. But I did go and see a psychologist. I actually thought, okay, I can't take this home to my family anymore. I can't. It's not fair to them. And I tried. I actually thought, okay, I'll give this a go. I didn't have much time for shrinks or anything. Told her everything, all my symptoms, everything is going through. And after 5 or so sessions, she's actually said, okay, that's pretty good. We're done here, and I'll call you in a week. So you can imagine I was ropeable with that. I'm like, how can you even say and think that? I know you don't. I already had very little trust for psychologists up to that point, and then that really hammered me. But yeah, I managed to an extent, lock it away, and I continued on in the TAU for 6 more years after that.
Coming up, the human toll of taking on dangerous criminals as your day job. As a direct result of the trauma you experienced at the Lindt Café, combined with countless violent, life-threatening operations in your 13 years in the TAU, you began to experience clear signs of PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. Ben, are you comfortable discussing this with me?
Yeah, of course. And initially I wasn't. Blokes like me, pretty old school, never liked talking about our feelings or anything. That was a big challenge in writing my book, but also probably the biggest reason to be able to share my story, and then also my decline into PTSD, the realisation I had it, and then the way I went about combating it to where I am today. Going back to work, back into the story, after Lindt, as I said, I tried locking away for a certain amount of time. Did stay on for another 6 years, and during that time too, the jobs didn't stop, and there were lots of other traumatic jobs and things I'd faced. Another big one was I'll just talk about it briefly, but it was at Botany in an underground car park. I was there with my shield man and good mate Paulie again. It was not necessarily a siege, but an armed offender suicide intervention. He'd had in a garage. He was in a camper van, doused the whole garage with fuel, had a knife, had other jerry cans of fuel. After negotiations went on, it became evident that he wasn't going to leave by himself. We got permission to go in and remove him. As we've tried cracking the front door of the garage, a steel mesh garage door, he's jumped into the van and you can see through the curtains into the back that he's splashing all the fuel around inside his camper van, which is quite concerning for us. We didn't have time for our BA, like the fire risk kit. We also wear that as well. The EA had been initiated, so we did have a fire hose there and a plan for everything. Paulie was second man in the stack. There was another part-timer actually on the shield. Went forward. Door wouldn't open because we're trying to rip him out, get him out as fast as we could. I smashed out with a bar, smashed out the side window. The plan was then for the fire hose to punch in and soak everything inside. Fire hose didn't work. Reasons still frustrate me today. I won't go into them. But anyway, next thing, I'm standing, just smashed out the window, and a huge flash of light, massive explosion. He'd detonated inside, and then the rush of air, and I got thrown back, honestly, the whole distance of the underground garage. Massive flame wall. I wasn't knocked out, but it took me a while to come to and stand back up, and I knew that Paulie was at the front of the car and couldn't get out of the garage. Later in talks with a psychologist, they told me that one of the reasons why it's so significant is because you and Paulie were together at Lindt, fully expecting a massive explosion, and now you've had this. And this was only a year or so after Lindt. And anyway, completely distressed. I needed to get to him, but I couldn't. Well, the floor-to-ceiling flame wall was just massive. Everything's black, can't see anything, can't see any of the other operators, but I knew I had to get to him. Kept trying to push through the flame wall, and as much as you're desperate and try, your body won't let you. You just start burning. It won't happen. And next thing, he's actually, not sure how, but he somehow appeared out of the flames and with his hands up, and there was flames going up, he's lapping up his body and even burning off his helmet. And I was looking into his eyes, and the next thing, it's like the lights have gone out and he just collapsed. I just grabbed him as hard as I could and pulled him out of the flames, and desperately I tried to drag him out by the top of his vest on his strap and screaming out for help because I was desperate in the situation. Need to get him out. And then the sergeants come back, Zed, and we both of us managed to drag him out, and looking down, his head's just completely, he was out cold, like bobbing off the ground. So for me, that was another one that, and after dragging him out, the ambos ran over to him. I didn't want to face it. I thought he was dead, so I had to walk off, but somehow he came to, and the next time I saw him, the fireys were putting cold water on his face and just had skin falling off onto the ground. And it's moved from thinking he was dead to now being concerned about him. But the point of that is I kept fighting on. I desperately wanted to stay there. They were my support network. They were who I wanted to be with. But after that job, I really knew my cup was the expression. My cup was full. during all this time, I had the massive inquest as well. That was very difficult, and then jobs like that and others. And eventually, though, I sort of had the decision taken from me, removed from me. I went off with another knee injury, work-related knee injury. I'd had 5 surgeries or so at that stage. And with a meeting with a surgeon, he's told me there's no way I can go back to work or do anything even close to it. He told me I should get a job like he's sitting behind a desk every day. My response to that was, you obviously don't know me too well, mate. That's not me. Couldn't do that. I'd be miserable. Yeah, it was a big whack, but I thought I'd do it like I've been told something similar before, and I fought my way through it and got back. And then as I was home off work, because obviously can't walk, and not being able to exercise, not being able to do anything, and that's when my thoughts just started going round and round and round. And yeah, I could tell I was not doing too well. A good mate of mine told me about the psychologist that he liked, and my response was, I don't like shrinks, I don't want to do it. But eventually he talked me into it, and I went and had a meeting weeks, maybe months after, and just from the get-go, I knew straight away she was different. She very personable. We shared banter. She was happy to tell me things about her life. I don't like being talked to or treated like I'm a patient. I don't do that. But yeah, right from the get-go, just completely different. And we got a really good rapport, and yeah, that's when I made the decision with myself, like, I know I'm not doing well, I'm crashing. So yeah, I opened up and started slowly, and then eventually it was like floodgates, and I did. I got a lot worse. As she told me there's a chance I would, or almost a reality I would. And from there started my whole journey with PTSD. I still didn't believe I had it at this stage. I went through every one of the symptoms, which I'd already been experiencing, but more so now. Drinking every day, pretty much alcoholic for quite a while. Not sleeping, locking myself away, refusing to talk to people, nightmares, just about everything. And things were already very strained at home too. Eventually it came up that she wanted me to visit a psych hospital, which I was very resistant to. But eventually, yeah, even my wife at the time told me, "It's like, you're going to lose your family. Like, look at you." Yeah, I got overweight. She didn't even have to tell me when to have a shower or get changed. So I had a massive beard. I was overweight. I was just drunk. Just locked myself away. Wouldn't talk to anyone. But it was actually a moment when I was dropping the kids off at school one day, because I've always been very hands-on dad, always been a big part of them. And they were fighting as usual, and next thing they were all fighting and screaming. I just cracked it, I was just all red and just screamed at them. And yeah, it was in that moment when they were all crying and upset. It was just because I just clicked it at them. I told myself, I was like, you got to do this for them if you're not willing to do it for you. And yeah, I decided to go to the psych hospital. As I said in my book, it was the second hardest door I've ever had to walk through, other than the one at Lindt. But yeah, and in there, it's very confronting, psych hospitals. There's all different levels of people with different psychological issues. Anyway, I was committed to it. On the first few days were hardest, but I made myself stay. And the more and more I learned about PTSD and symptoms and side effects, and I knew I was ticking just about every single one of the boxes. And yeah, I finally admitted it to myself. My official diagnosis was PTSD, severe depression, anxiety, and panic disorder. That was what I was suffering from. And I made the decision there and then that I was going to do whatever I could to combat it. And yeah, that's where my journey, where I'd finally realised that was it, and that was now the biggest threat in my life. And I made the decision I was going to use as many resources as I could to now beat PTSD. I had to get over a great deal of inhibitions with that. Firstly, trusting psychologists, psychiatrists, and honestly, I did. I hate medication. I had to. My panic attacks were that severe. I couldn't go out in public. It just come on at any time. It was so debilitating. I even went on medication. I even did things like yoga and breathing and meditation, and I did one thing where they put magnets on my brain. I went and did that for a bit, and it's like the whole idea is because PTSD, you're constantly in fight or flight zone, so putting magnetic rays through literally your brain, it stimulates brain flow. And honestly, I went, you know what, this PTSD is not going to be who I am. It's not going to define me, and I'm going to beat it. And I applied pretty much what I learned in the police force and the TAU, that you have to confront the threat, you have to move to the threat and use every resource you can to do so, which is what I did, and even wrote a book during this time, which is very cathartic. But through my approach to it, which is a big message in the book, and since releasing it, the way I've gone about PTSD, and it's resonated with so many people, getting so much positive feedback. And from there, also finally getting my name and my face out there and my identity back was so important, because firstly I want to put my name to my story and the book and everything, but also now I have the ability to get out there now and speak with as many people, share my story, my approach to PTSD, and hopefully help as many people as I can. And that's now my intention. That's now my goal. I'd love to be still in the police force and in the TAU. I can't do that. But I think service has always sort of been a big part of who I am. And in a reality, this is now how I can serve and help people. So that's very important to me, and now I've got it. And I feel within myself today that to a degree I've beaten PTSD and my depression and everything. Like, it's always going to be there if I don't constantly address it. If it starts popping up or my anxiety's popping up, like I'll always be trying to get on top of it. But now I'm optimistic about the future, you know. And biggest thing for me out of all the different treatments was always training, exercise at the gym, eating well, trying to sleep well. If you can do those minor things plus everything else I was willing to do, if I can share that message, I can help people.
I've read your book, mate. It's an incredible book. It's called Tiger, 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 and I'm just going to say a couple of things, because I know there's a lot of folks that read it already, but there'll be a lot more folks listening to this interview who can pick up the book. They can download the book. I know we get a lot of guys and women in the job, you know, were in the job, husbands, wives, family. They're listening to this. Is there one or two pieces of advice that you would give to someone who was struggling like you were, or a loved one who can see someone who was struggling like you were? What would be one or two things that you would say that you think would be most important for them to hear?
Yeah, and as you just said then, it's also the families and everyone around the PTSD sufferers. They suffer and struggle so badly, which is another big reason for me wanting to do it. My message would be, basically, you can't do it on your own. I've tried it over and over. It's something you can't do on your own, and you're just going to have to drop your inhibitions in relation to psychologists or psychiatrists, and just listen to all the experts. It's don't let it define you, don't let it own you, don't let it be your identity. As with everything in life, you have to take an active role, and you have to fight to get what you want, and what you should want is to be able to live a good life where PTSD isn't ruling that. So basically, as hard as it is when you're at your lowest, you have to, within yourself, want to get better, which your family will definitely want you to, but also drop all your inhibitions and listen to the experts. There's so many more experts out there now. There's people who know this is their job, this is their lifelong profession. So yeah, basically, don't try and do it on your own. It's not going to work. Listen to the experts, drop your inhibitions, and just fight for them.
And mate, I really picked up on something you said a few moments ago. The tipping point for you was realising that you might not want to do this for yourself, but you've got 3 little girls. And a lot of people, again, listening, if you can't, at the stage you're at, think of doing it for yourself, do it for those kids, do it for those loved ones.
Yeah. Any of your loved ones that's affecting them adversely in ways you within yourself can't understand, and it's having terrible effects to everyone around you and loved ones. And that's also a big reason for why I'm pushing for this parliamentary inquiry into it, because at the moment, first responders and PTSD is just not being addressed at all correctly. They've done a lot of work within the military, and that's now leaps and bounds ahead. Yeah, and through Daily Telegraph, and that's a big thing I'm pushing for, and it's getting a lot of weight. So, as I was saying, I want to help people, and in doing that, which I believe is now a matter of time, that will help people.
Ben, I want to thank you so very much for coming in, mate, and spending a couple of hours with us here. I want to thank you for your 20 years of service to the people in New South Wales. You lost a hell of a lot of skin, mate, along the way. And I want to thank you also for the work that you continue to do to make that path an easier one for others to go down that you had to walk down. So it's been an absolute privilege to have you here, and thanks for taking the time to have a chat.
Of course, and thanks very much for having me on.
Crime Insiders Detectives is a listener original podcast. The production team for this episode was Holly Mitchell, Jade Murray and Lindt Café. Executive producer is Dan Mullins. That's all we have time for this week. As you can probably imagine, I'm a big fan of all things crime. I discovered a fantastic podcast on the other side of the world, and I'm totally hooked. It's called Red Rum True Crime. It's hosted by Grace Cordell. Each episode focuses on a new story, real life, real victims, real crime. A case I'd never heard of is that of the Candyman Dean Kroll. Imagine trusting the local candy store owner only to discover he's one of the most sadistic serial killers in history. Dean Kroll, who they've called the Candyman, lured innocent teens into a nightmare beyond belief. What drove him to commit some of the most chilling murders in Texas history is pretty unbelievable. You won't believe how deep this darkness goes. Check it out. Red Rum True Crime. You'll love it. The trailer is up next, and you can find links to Red Rum in our show notes.
Hi, I'm Grace, host of Red Rum True Crime podcast. These cases focus on the true victims of crime. Why not jump in at episode 114, the tragic murder of Jasmine and Aaliyah? The main suspect in this case gave an extremely bizarre interview to a number of press reporters whilst he was drunk and reportedly high. He speaks about an awful lot on camera and has this completely inappropriate laughing and chuckling response when talking about the case. He may even have thought he was gonna get away with the double murder he'd been accused of, but what he didn't know was that 2 undercover officers were on their way to catch him out, and he easily and willingly took the bait. You can find us wherever you get your podcasts. Just search Red Rum True Crime. That's Red Rum, murder backwards, REDRUM True Crime.